We are live. Welcome to NBA Deeper Dive. It is Friday, December 27th. I'm Josh Engelman. I'm joined by DK. I pointed in the right direction. 8 games ahead of us. A bit of injury news left to go. A lot of it has been trickling in throughout the day, including just before we got started, Cam Johnson going to be out for Brooklyn. They are already missing quite a few dudes. So talent for Brooklyn going to be kind of thin. Doesn't look like we're going to get Draymond today. Already don't have Steph, no Devin Booker, no Luka Doncic. Trying to scroll up with my mind and see if I could remember anybody else that's hanging in the balance. No Andrew Nembhard, whose name does not necessarily match all of the names that I just mentioned, but still, he's out. Orlando obviously missing a bunch of dudes. Boston news to come. DK, this is going to be a wild one.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild slate. Again, the Nets value is, we got to talk about it. There's definitely going to be a lot of opportunities there. We got to figure out what Steve Kerr is going to do. And it's definitely going to be a late swap slate too, because we got games all night. And we got the Millie Maker tonight. So, excited to light $2,500 on fire.
I've got a sneeze right in this giant beak. Here it comes.
Yeah, get it out.
Whoo. Man, that was invigorating. I hope I have one of those like every 30 minutes or so to keep me awake for the rest of all of this. Before we get started, because we do have a lot of injury news and everything to talk about. We got plenty of time. We also got the news a couple minutes ago. Mike Brown out as the coach of the Sacramento Kings. Put another checkbox in the "this is a terrible organization" column for Sacramento. Swing and a miss on this one. They're doomed. They're doomed.
Yeah, I don't really get him getting fired. I don't think he really did anything wrong. It's just kind of the roster, you know?
Yeah, to me, he's done everything right. To get that talent to be 18th in defensive rating is a lot of work. Sabonis, not very good on D. DeMar DeRozan, not very good on D. Keon Ellis is, but they don't seem to like to play him. I don't know if that's a Mike Brown thing or a front office thing. I guess we'll figure that out soon enough if Keon Ellis just immediately steps into the shooting guard role, but don't know for sure. This team needs a lot of work, and there's not a lot of easy ways to do that. But I would have kept the coach that can turn a garbage group of defenders into a decent enough group of defenders. And I might not have traded DeMar DeRozan, but that's neither here nor there. Sacramento, enjoy the bottom for a bit, guys, because it's not getting better from here. I love it. I'd love it. But now we shall talk some basketball. Data is going to be a little murky for right now because I know they're going to be working on that Cam Johnson change. So we're going to need another run of ownership. So I don't want to dig too closely into it. But this first game we can hit, and there's not really any impact to everything we've talked about. The New York Knicks are 7.5-point favorites in Orlando. 213.5 total. I have this as the slowest game on the slate, and there's basically 4 games that have the lowest total. This one's at 213. Spurs and Brooklyn's at like 212. Minnesota, Houston's at 214. Golden State and the Clippers are at like 212. All of these games are basically the same total. We've got some in the 230s, but this is the one that I have with the lowest pace, and it shows defensive matchup for the Knicks against Orlando. Pace down spot. These Knicks guys are getting no love. Somewhere in like the 6% ownership range to Brunson, and that's the high mark. The second highest owned guy for New York is Precious Achiuwa. Everybody else is below 6. Now, I think these guys are under-owned for a large field GPP, whether that's Bridges, who's been playing a lot better, Hart, Anunoby, even Brunson or Towns. But I don't know how you get to anything from the Knicks and feel like great about it. Not only are you locking in a 7 o'clock start in a bad game environment, but it's not like any of these guys look good to begin with.
Yeah, it's a good point, too, with the early game with a lot of news kind of still up in the air. Again, like locking in a spot is kind of tough. Really bad matchup here against the Magic. So there's just not a ton that looks great for New York. I mean, they are going to run a pretty tight rotation, but I mean, no one's getting ownership, and I kind of agree. Karl-Anthony Towns at 9.6, coming in about 3%. He's dealt foul trouble in each of the last 3 games. So 27, 32, and 30 minutes in those games. In competitive games where he avoids foul trouble, he definitely has, high 30s minutes in his range of outcomes. So I think Cat's like a little bit interesting for tournaments, but Again, he's only center eligible and an early game. Achua's getting the most love right now, 3.5K. I don't love that. He's got extended a bit because of the Karl-Anthony Towns foul trouble. I don't think you can expect Cat foul trouble every single game. And then, Brunson's coming in around 5%. The wing's not getting much love. I just think it's almost a cross-off team for me, especially with there being a lot of news that we're still waiting for in the later games.
Yeah, I'm with you. I wish the game time was slightly different because I would want to get to, like, I had Bridges 9% optimal. He's 2% owned. I had Hart at 10. I had Anunoby at 10. These guys are not really pulling anything. So I like them as pivots if you build a relatively chalky lineup. But I also don't love the fact that the matchup stinks and this is the only 7 o'clock start. You're immediately locking that into your lineup. That becomes probably not all that advantageous. Now, if you're playing large field stuff and you've got, 50 lineups, 100 lineups, 150 lineups, then I don't mind as much grabbing some shares in New York because I do like being a little bit over on them. But like if I'm playing the Millie, man, that's a tough click.
Yeah, agree.
Not only is it just a tough click in that these guys aren't owned all that much and like it's tough to want to get there, but then you also have to get which one of them play well correct. Like I don't have a great feel between Bridges, Hart, and Anunoby. I got to get that right first and then figure out if that's going to even be a score that I could use. So I'd love to talk more about them. I don't think there's much to say. We know the guys that are going to play 36 minutes or more, and they all look like nobody wants to get to them. So if you like that, guys, play a couple Knicks, but be aware of what you're giving up.
Right. Like when this team is fully healthy on a normal slate, they're just like pretty boring to talk about, right? Because they do the same thing every single day. There's not really much. They don't really change much. So not really much else to add for New York for me.
Orlando is not all that different in this case either. 14% ownership coming into Tristan da Silva. They're a lot more owned on the FanDuel side, but like nothing too crazy. KCP is 2. Jalen Suggs is 3. Trevelyan Queen up to 4,300, still getting 8% ownership. That's everybody that's north of 1% for Orlando. Now they get a slightly better matchup in that they don't have to face their own defense. They get to face the Knicks, which is not the thing that the Knicks have that's really, really good, like their offense. Do you like anything on the Orlando side here? Because they're obviously shorthanded. There's minutes to go around, but
yep. I don't love anything. I think there are some value plays in consideration. It's just, God, I don't trust this. I don't trust this Magic rotation at all. But last game, like they gave the starters a lot of run. Da Silva played 39 minutes. Trevelyan Queen, who has been out of the rotation for a while, comes in, starts. He played 37 minutes last game. KCP, Suggs, Goga all played 30 plus minutes. I don't think you can expect that again, but I do think that Da Silva and Trevelyan Queen are viable. In the last 5 games for Da Silva, 32, 37, 36, 39 minutes. He's not the best point per minute player, but he's firmly in play for value. Trevelyan Queen, 34, 37 minutes since being inserted in the starting lineup. Again, not a great point per minute player, but only 4.3K. I think I prefer some value in the later games. We'll talk about Brooklyn. We'll talk about Golden State. I think there's better value there, but I do think that these guys are solid value plays. I just think like if one of those guys struggles, like the minutes do not have to be there at all. Like last game, you saw the minutes on Jonathan Isaac have been not great. He only played 13 minutes last game. Anthony Black only played 13 minutes. Cole Anthony only played about 11 minutes. Carter Jr. only played 15 minutes. Like the minutes could definitely increase for those guys. So that would be the issue there. It's just that I don't have a ton of confidence the minutes will be there again. But those are really the only 2 guys getting love. I think it's pretty hard to get to anyone else. I mean, obviously the rebounding number is going to go up for Goga with Wendell Carter Jr. moving to the bench. But he's up to 6.8K now. There's some slight foul concerns against Cat too. I do have some interest in Da Silva and Queen, but not a ton of confidence in the minutes.
We're on the same page there. Those are the guys you want to go to for value, and they're very reasonable value options today. But I think we got a lot of dudes that will look like them, and they don't start at 7 o'clock. And I think that's pretty important. This would have been a really fun game if Orlando was at full strength.
Yeah, for sure. I would definitely want to watch it.
Yeah. We do have some good games on today's slate for once. This one doesn't profile as one, but I guess it could be. The Indiana Pacers are 12-point dogs in Boston, 230 total. For Indiana, we got the news about an hour before the show started that Andrew Nembhard will be out for today. We still don't technically know the status of Enrique Freeman and Quentin Jackson. I wouldn't read too much into that, but one of them might see the floor for a couple minutes today. What we do know is that there's no ownership coming into the Pacers unless you're looking on FanDuel to TJ McConnell at 5K, who continues to get a little bit of love there for no reason. 4% ownership to Benedict Mathurin is the highest owned guy for the Pacers. Clearly, tough defensive matchup. This is a slight pace down spot for Indy. I kind of look at the Indy starters the same way that I was looking at the Knicks. I think they should be higher than like 2% owned. It should be in like that 7 to 8 range. I'm also not super excited to grab a couple of these guys up against Boston in an early game.
Yeah. So for the Pacers, I think like McConnell would probably be the preferred option for me. 4.9K on DraftKings with Nembhard out. You would think that he probably gets a bump in minutes. So, I think he's got like 25 plus minutes in his range of outcomes for sure. So I think a 4.9K McConnell's a little bit interesting. Also, with Nembhard out, Halliburton's assist numbers do go up a bit. So that raises his floor a little bit. And then do you think that with Nembhard out, they're going to start Ben Shepherd?
That's who I'm going with for right now. I mean, he was the guy that was in that role before he got hurt when Nembhard was hurt. But then he ended up out for a bit. But my guess is Shepherd. I don't think they'd go like in theory. I guess it could be Furphy or Walker, but I don't assume that's going to be happening. I think it's a little bit easier to just make it Shepherd, especially with Toppin out. Maybe you don't want to move like Walker around in that way, but my expectation is Shepherd.
Okay. Even if Shepherd starts for me, I don't think I can get to him. 3.7K. It's really bad point per minute player. I do think Jarris Walker at 3.2 is a little bit interesting, especially with Obi out. Like I think he could see a little bit more run, and he's a bit of a better point per minute player. So right now he's getting the most ownership for the Pacers, and I think I kind of agree with that. So 3.2K Walker I think is a bit interesting. Everything else, not much ownership at all. Halliburton, I already mentioned him. I think he's fine for tournaments. But yeah, I would have thought that there'd be more to like here for the Pacers with a few guys out, but not the best spot against the Celtics. And I think there's just other better point per dollar plays on the slate.
Yeah, I'm with you. Pivots on their, big four, Halliburton, Siakam, Mathurin, Turner. If that's a chalky guy you want to take out of a lineup and swap to one of those guys, I could understand it, but it's not like any of these guys are profiling as amazing options. The starting lineup will be important. Mm-hmm. If that doesn't happen to be Shepherd and it ends up being Furphy or Walker, that will be something to look at because those guys are going to get enough minutes to look like decent enough values. But I mean, Shepherd, the problem for Shepherd is that he's like a 0.6 to 0.65 fantasy point per minute guy. Right. You get Furphy or Walker in there. Not that either one of them are amazing, but they're slightly better than that. Walker in particular.
There were times when I played Ben Shepherd in the summer league, and the guy was like a 0.5 fantasy point per minute player. So, really, he's probably at the bottom tier of your list of right there, like PJ Tucker or whatever for worst point per minute.
Summer League DFS, that's some extra special degenerate right there.
Oh, yeah. I love it, though. I'm crazy.
Ben Shepherd is the 9th worst per minute guy that I have in the model behind Tucker, Harris, Gary Harris, Maxi Kleba, Cam Reddish, Gabe Vincent, Cody Williams, Josh Green, and Caleb Houston.
Not surprised at all.
No. All those names make sense.
Yep.
Now for Boston, we really don't know what these guys are going to be doing today. Q tag on Drew Holiday, Q tag on Kristaps Porzingis. The way that I have the line right now, my expectation is that at least one of those guys are not going to be playing. We'll see what that ends up unlocking. But as of right now, we are getting to quite a bit of Jason Tatum. He is 30% owned on DraftKings, around 25 on FanDuel. Jaylen Brown is 10% on both sites. And then basically no one's getting any love on either one of the sites. So assuming everybody's in, how are you feeling about Tatum here in that ownership?
Yeah, so assuming everyone's in, I think Tatum's going a little bit over-owned. Boston's one of those teams when they're fully healthy. It's kind of tough to figure out like who it's going to be on a night in, night out basis. And if the field's just going to gravitate towards Jason Tatum, I think there's other guys on this team that look like pretty good tournament plays, like Jaylen Brown right now coming in about a third of the ownership of Tatum, $2,000 cheaper. I think makes her a pretty good pivot in tournaments. Porzingis, assuming he's good to go, no limitations, I think is a little bit interesting at 5% as well. So you do have some interesting tournament plays here for Boston. Drew Holiday, even at 4.7, I think is a fair value play. But if you do end up getting one or two of these guys out, that's where it's going to change. And a lot of these guys are going to look better. And then you would if Porzingis gets ruled out, you'd probably get Horford starting. If Drew gets rolled out too, then Pritchard becomes in play. He would play more. But yeah, assuming they're fully healthy, I get why Tatum's getting ownership for sure. It's a good spot, but I do think he's going a little bit over-owned.
I agree. He looks good, but he'd look a lot more interesting to me at 24% ownership compared to 32. And it's also possible that it's just that easy to pay up to that range because of some of the value that we're unlocking now that you're kind of getting to him more by default. It does make Jaylen Brown look a little bit more intriguing to me because I don't think he's all that different of a play than Tatum relative to his salary, but he's getting a third of the ownership. So I wouldn't mind going that direction, but we're going to need that news. But like I said, I've got the line at 15.5. Last betting line that I grabbed was 12. My expectation is that one of these guys are not going to be playing today, and that's going to bring the line back down to for me to match the markets. And if that happens, someone's going to get a little bit more of something. Who that ends up being is sort of dependent on which one of these guys happens to be out. It's crazy how far Indiana's just not very good. It kind of just happened out of nowhere.
Yeah, what's their record right now? Do they even have a winning record?
The Indiana Pacers are 15-16.
Okay, yeah, I figured they're around 500, but yeah, they've been pretty disappointing. Because for the most part they've been healthy too. It's not like they've been super injury prone or something. Most of the time they've had a pretty healthy roster, so they've definitely underperformed this year.
Absolutely. I don't have anything else here for Indy and Boston, so I will let you guys know the schedule for the rest of the night. We haven't had this schedule for a while. Now, NBA Live Before Lock will be up next. They'll go from 6 until 7. They'll take you all the way up through whatever Knicks Orlando news we get, although that shouldn't really be anything. You'll probably start seeing some of that 7:30 news coming in towards the end of Live Before Lock. So you don't want to miss that one. Stay right on this stream. You don't have to open up anything else. We just keep going all the way up until 7. But at 7, for the first time since last Friday, we're back on Playback. Playback.tv/Stokastic. You guys can come, link up a League Pass account, and watch the games along with us. We all get the same visual. We're chatting about ownership, bets that we've placed, swaps that we want to make, and we'll be there for an hour. If you don't have League Pass, we have 20 VIP passes that we can hand out, so then you would have it anyway and be able to participate along with us. But it's a great spot to be, especially on a day where it seems like we're going to have some news creeping through while we're live. We'll be watching Knicks Orlando for the first half hour, and then probably swap over to San Antonio, Brooklyn, because that one's going to be a little bit more interesting from a DFS perspective. But that's playback.tv/Stokastic. The San Antonio Spurs, 7.5 point favorite. Well, it was 7.5. I'm guessing that line moved even more now with no Cam Johnson. 8.5. Spurs are 8.5 point favorites in Brooklyn, 212 total. Now for San Antonio, they're at full strength. We're not really worried about anything for these guys. 25% ownership coming into Devin Vassell. He's 5,200, shooting guard, small forward eligible. We're up to 10% on Wemby now, 11K, center only. This dude is amazing. And then a little trickle to Jeremy Sohan and Chris Paul. Nobody else is getting any love. I don't really see anybody else really getting any love. I do think Chris Paul is under-owned, though. But what do you like for San Antonio?
Yeah, I like your Chris Paul call there, coming in around 6%, 5.8K. San Antonio did run a relatively tight rotation last game. I don't know if that's going to happen again, but you saw 36 minutes for Chris Paul, 40 minutes for Wembanyama. You did not see the Spurs play a backup 5 last game. Bassie was a DNP and Zach Collins was a DNP. I would think you probably see some Bassie in this game, but wanted to mention that. But yeah, a 5.8K Chris Paul, I think, is a pretty good contrarian option. 35, 36 minutes over the last couple of games. So I think he's a good pivot right now to Devin Vassell. I think Devin Vassell stands out as probably your best play in the Spurs, shooting guard, small forward eligible, 5.2K. But Chris Paul basically coming in about a quarter of that ownership, I think makes for a decent pivot there. So yeah, like the call there on Chris Paul. Again, I think Vassell is probably your most optimal guy to get to since he's been inserted in the starting lineup in competitive games. 38 minutes against Atlanta, but I went to overtime, so 33. He played 32 against Philly and then 36 against the Knicks. 23 in a game against Portland, but that game was a massive blowout. So you should see 30 plus minutes from Vassell here. So yeah, I think he is probably the easiest guy to get to. And then looking at other ownership, Wembanyama coming in around 10%. We definitely have a good amount of value on this slate. So it's kind of setting up for a bit of a stars and scrubs slate, which I think makes Wembanyama a little bit more interesting, especially since he's not getting a ton of love too. Like he played 40 minutes last time out. So I like the ceiling on Wembanyama quite a bit, obviously. Looking at the rest of the team, kind of indifferent on Sohan. Coming in a little bit less than 10% ownership, 6.2K. Reasonable last man in, but definitely not going to prioritize him. The minutes have been way down in Keldon Johnson. I don't think it's necessary to get to him. The price has dropped, but don't even think even at 4K, I'm going to look there. Stephon Castle's minutes have ticked way down as well. I think it's really hard to go there. Champagny since moving to the bench, the minutes not been great. So for me, I think it's mainly Vassell, Wembanyama, and Chris Paul. And then I'm okay with Jeremy Sohan. I don't think I'm going to get to anyone else, though.
Yeah, Paul was the guy that was really standing out to me. I totally agree with the Vassell take. I mean, shooting guard, small forward, 5,200 in the starting lineup now. Like the flexibility you get by going to him and being able to move him around is perfect. And he's good, or at least good enough at that price tag. But yeah, I had Paul come out of my optimal at 16%, only getting 7% ownership. I'm a big believer in, it seems like he's going to be getting these minutes. That's increased minutes at least. I also thought that about Mike Conley like 3 weeks ago, and that immediately stopped. So could be today. Who knows? Maybe they don't want to step on the gas with Brooklyn. This would be a good time to actually sit Chris Paul and just give Trey Jones some run, but I'm not going to speak that into existence. But I think he's, at least so far through the 5 teams that we've talked about, I think Chris Paul is the most under-owned guy relative to where I have them. Happy to get to Wemby. I just don't think he looks as good as Jokic, and that becomes an interesting push-pull between the two of them. Sohan's fine, but yeah, Vassell's the easiest name to click. Chris Paul's my sneaky guy.
Like it.
The San Antonio team, I'm fascinated to see what they do either at the deadline or during the summer, because something's going to happen. Wemby's too good right now to mess around, and they've got enough assets that they can do things, and it doesn't really impact them all that much. I don't know who that's going to be. I don't know, somebody all the time is coming up for some sort of deal.
You think they're going to make a move at the deadline for sure?
I doubt it, just because I don't think they care too much about making that push right now.
Yeah.
I think they could potentially do something around contracts that they don't care so much about, whether that's Keldon Johnson or Harrison Barnes. Right. Zach Collins has another year left on his deal, and he's already out of the rotation. So they can aggregate some salary together, attach a small asset or two, and get somebody in that's real, that doesn't necessarily have to be a big name, but a very clear rotation piece. I think they're probably more likely to do something big in the summer. I just don't have a damn clue what that would be. Somebody's eventually going to shake loose. They're not going to want to be where they are. And I think Victor Wembanyama is a decent selling point for wanting to come to San Antonio.
Agree there.
I just don't know who it'd be. I'm Team LaMelo for this one, but I don't know if that would be. I don't know if LaMelo wants to go play in San Antonio.
That would be so fun, LaMelo and Wemby.
He's so good on offense. Maybe the culture of San Antonio would be what he'd need, but he strikes me as a guy that's probably never going to get that bug in him, unfortunately. I don't know. De'Aaron Fox got his coach fired today, so he's probably sticking around in Sacramento for a bit. I don't want to do this, but we have to do it. So the Brooklyn Nets are definitely a team that's playing today. And they're going to be, obviously, without Zaire Williams, Trendon Watford, Cam Thomas. Ben Simmons is out for this one on the back-to-back. Cam Johnson got ruled out. And we are still technically waiting on the status of Dorian Finney-Smith, although it seems like he's in for today, although I feel like I said that 2 days ago and then he was out anyway. But there's some ownership coming into these guys. 25% to Noah Clowney, 35% to Shake Milton, 40 to Nick Claxton, around 10 for Keon Johnson, around 10 for Tyrese Martin. Let's start with the guys that are already projected for a massive amount of ownership. Noah Clowney, Shake Milton, Nick Claxton. What do you like from that trio?
Assuming he starts, I think Shake Milton would probably be the preferred option there. This team just needs like ball handling. No Ben Simmons, no Cam Thomas, obviously no Dennis Schroeder. So if Shake Milton gets the start, I think he looks like a really good value there at 4.5K. I guess my question for you is, so do you think the starting lineup will be Shake, Keon Johnson, Clowney, Claxton, Jalen Wilson?
Did you say if Finney Smith is out?
Well, if Dorian Finney-Smith is out, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Keon Johnson, Shake, Claxton, Clowney and Wilson. Is that? It feels like that's it, but I mean, a couple of the names that we just dropped there are mildly interchangeable. But yeah, that would be my assumption. And then obviously, if Dorian Finney-Smith is in, I assume he would start over Wilson in that discussion.
Yeah. Do you think they would start him at the 3, though? Or do you think they would move Clowney to the bench, maybe?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
It probably doesn't matter. Like, I think Clowney's playing 30 today, like one way or the other.
Yeah. Okay.
I would lean them starting Clowney, but it's like 55-45. It's not anything that I'm pretty confident they're not going to start Reese Beekman or Dariq Whitehead, and probably not Jalen Martin. After that, you could randomly pick the names, and I think that would be a reasonable way to go about it. But like, obviously, if Clowney's getting 30 minutes at 4,700, that's a really good point per dollar guy. Shake Milton, assuming he's starting, playing around 30 minutes, that's a decent point per dollar guy. Yep. Claxton looks great from a point per dollar basis. I think Keon Johnson and Tyrese Martin both look solid enough in that regard. The one piece that I sort of want to dig into here, because I understand why those guys are getting minutes. There's a ton of playing time to go around. They've got nothing else that they could possibly do. So guys are going to soak up some minutes. Here's the reverse question right now, because based on what I'm seeing, if Dorian Finney-Smith is in, they've got 11 guys. Who do you think is most likely to play a bunch of minutes no matter what this game looks like, but also close in a blowout?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the 3 guys that would definitely be on the court in a blowout would be Jalen Martin, Beekman, and Whitehead. And then I think, well, it would depend on the starting lineup. I think Tyrese Martin would probably be in there. He's going to play either way, and then I think he would probably play in a blowout.
Is it Sharp or Clowney?
Probably Day'Ron Sharp.
Yeah. I think I'm with you there.
Yeah. So that's a good point. Again, they would have 11 if Dorian Finney-Smith plays, only 10 if Dorian Finney-Smith does not. So you'd feel a little bit better about some of these value plays if Dorian Finney-Smith gets ruled out. I do think that I think that Keon Johnson's like a good pivot off some of the chalk at a similar price point on the same team. 4.7K, like he's dealt with some foul trouble too. I think he's probably going to be like a secondary ball handler with Shake Milton. So I think the assist numbers are going to go up a bit on Keon Johnson. So I kind of like him as a contrarian player right now for the Nets. Again, it's Clowney, Milton, and Claxton getting a lot of love, but Keon Johnson not so much. And then like Tyrese Martin, 3.6K, as we just talked about, right? Like if this game gets out of hand, I think he's probably playing no matter what. So that's a little bit interesting. Day'Ron Sharp is not getting much love either. He's 3.8K. I think he's another reasonable tournament play too. But what do you think about like Keon Johnson as a contrarian option?
Don't hate it. Graded out decently before this show started for me as like a guy you could get to as a value option. It's going to look a lot better when I can rerun some stuff after the show. My only concern with what you said there for him is that you would expect his assist rate to go up a little bit in this scenario. Maybe his potential assist rate probably goes up quite a bit. Whether or not any of these idiots can convert that basket, it might be a little tricky for Brooklyn because these guys are dreadful. There's not a single average offensive player anywhere to be found on this Brooklyn team. It's hard to be less average than what these guys are on the offensive side of the ball. So the opportunity will be there. I'm not sure if anybody's ever going to get a decent enough shot against San Antonio. Wemby might send it into the upper deck if they do. But like the path is there for him if Brooklyn is in this game for Keon Johnson to get some scoring, drop a couple more assists than he normally does because no one else can handle the ball. It's just really ugly. I mean, there's a lot of names on this Brooklyn team that are not NBA players.
Yeah, it's pretty gross. And again, if Dorian Finney-Smith plays, like it does, it's not going to make you feel great about some of these guys. So if the game gets out of hand, like most of them are not going to play in a blowout. So
Doug Christie expected to be the Sacramento Kings interim head coach. And rest in peace to Greg Gumbel, who passed away.
Oh, really? Damn. That's
Doug
sad.
Christie.
Was Christie assistant coach for Sacramento?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. I don't know what they're doing. So, yeah, we're going to need this Brooklyn starting lineup for sure. We're going to need that Dorian Finney-Smith lineup for sure, because if he happens to be out, then there's a decent chance that someone gets real rotation minutes and closing run minutes if this game gets out of hand. So it's not going to be fun to be rostering these Brooklyn guys, but this is the first game that we got to where it's like, okay, there's a lot here. It's not fun, but it's here.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is a team that you have to consider on this slate. So definitely monitor the starting lineup because that's going to be pretty important.
All right, I'm going to try to hit this as quickly as I can because there's not an actual answer to this question. But Rick Stanfield said, hit us with the super chat. What's your best FanDuel single entry lineup for today? Not a question we're going to be answering here. That's an impossible thing to do while we're doing this show. Best I can do is tell you the guys that are getting any ownership on FanDuel and what you should be building around. That would be Shake Milton, heavily owned at 4,300. Jonathan Kuminga is 50% owned right now at 5,600. He looks great given everything that's out for Golden State. Two more Nets in Noah Clowney and Nick Claxton. Probably trying to grab two of those three guys that I mentioned for the Nets at this point. James Harden is pretty popular on the FanDuel side at 8,900. Bradley Beal is pretty popular on the FanDuel side at 6,900 with no Devin Booker and no Grayson Allen. And then the two pay-ups that are getting the most love are 10-4 Jason Tatum. He's about 27% owned. And then 11-9 Victor Wembanyama because he has the power forward eligibility and creates a little bit more flexibility. All righty, game 4. Thank you for that, Rick. We're getting all this Saturday news. It's driving me insane.
I know. I just saw that. Like a ton of notifications. I'm like, oh, no, it's all Saturday.
The Minnesota Timberwolves. This is the first game where it's just like, cool. I'm excited to watch this one. Timberwolves are 1-point dogs in Houston, 214 total. We have a Q tag on Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And I guess we just did technically get a new injury report for today. So just in case any of that leaked out in the last minute, yes, he is still questionable. Joe Ingles questionable as well, but that doesn't matter. And then on the Houston side, stop me if you've heard this one before. Tari Eason is questionable for this one. We already got the news that Dylan Brooks is out. Not a lot of ownership coming into Minnesota. Not a lot of ownership coming into this game, honestly. But 10% to Julius Randle is the only guy at double digits on DraftKings for either Minnesota or Houston. We know exactly what Minnesota is doing with their rotation. It's kind of the same situation for me as it is every other day. I'll take any one of their 7 main guys. None of them are a priority. All of them are totally fine to have in a lineup. Do you like anything for Minnesota if Nickeil Alexander-Walker is in?
If he's in, no. Like I said, I'm in agreement with you. I think any of the main guys are fine, but when this team's fully healthy, usually hard to prioritize one of these guys. I think probably a 4.6K Naz Reid would be my preferred option. But again, everyone is sub 10% owned. So there's no priorities here. Rudy Gobert is down to 6K. That's a fair price point, but again, it's relatively high opportunity cost with a lot of the good centers that we have on this slate. So again, that's kind of why he's not getting a ton of love. And then if Nickeil Alexander-Walker, or if NAW does not play, My guess is you'd probably see Rob Dillingham enter the rotation, and then you'd probably get a bump in minutes for DiVincenzo and Conley. I still don't know if it would make me feel really excited to get to those guys. I don't think I'd be jamming Conley or DiVincenzo, but I do think they would look slightly better if Nickeil ends up sitting.
I kind of feel like they'd go to Josh Minot.
You think so?
But I don't have a great feel there. I mean, I don't think that you're going to be playing Dillingham or Minot in this scenario. And it could just simply be both of them. They try one. If that's not working, they go to the other guy. So I wouldn't have any confidence there. But like Dillingham is so much smaller than Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I wonder if they try to get a little bit more size out against this massive Houston team outside of Fred VanVleet, at least.
Yeah. The more that I think about it, actually, I think you're right. I think it probably would be Minot that gets.
And he has been the guy that they've unearthed a little bit over the past couple, more so than Dillingham. It certainly could be Dillingham. That wouldn't surprise me. But honestly, the real thing that wouldn't surprise me is if they played 7 dudes.
Yeah, I think that definitely would be in the range of outcomes for the way that Minnesota has ran their rotation this year.
Yeah, I can't look at Minnesota and think I need to get to this one particular guy, but any Edwards, Gobert, Randall, McDaniels, Conley, Reed, DiVincenzo, if they're in a lineup, I'm not freaking out about it. Terrible spot. A lot of defense going on.
They're all kind of last guys in, really. There's no one you're going to go out of your way to roster.
Completely agree. And unfortunately, that's basically the exact same situation for Houston, only they look even worse than Minnesota. 6% ownership to Amen Thompson is the most for anybody here on the DraftKings side. Thompson did get to around 15 on FanDuel. Everybody else is in single digits across both sides. I just think they look sort of the same as Minnesota did. If I had Jabari Smith or Van Vliet or Jalen Green or Şengün or Amen Thompson, fine. That'll work. They're not terrible plays by any means, but they're certainly not priorities. We do need that Tari Eason news. If he happens to be out, you'll feel a lot better about giving Cam Whitmore a couple extra minutes, and small forward, power forward at 4,200. That's going to be enough that you could use him as a value play. But I mean, this is a defensive matchup through and through. I have a hard time grabbing Houston.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit higher on Thompson than the field right now. With Dylan Brooks out, the minutes have been really solid on him. So 2 games ago, he started, played 38 minutes. Last game, he only played 31 minutes. However, he was on pace to play a lot more. If you look at the rotation at Add More Funds, he was on pace to play a ton. He got subbed out at the beginning of the 4th quarter with 9 minutes left. So he was definitely on pace to play high 30s minutes again. So even though it's not really a great matchup, I do think Thompson is probably the guy that the best here. He's also got shooting guard, small forward eligibility. Which makes it a little bit easier to get to him. So 5% Thompson, I think, stands out as a pretty good play. And then the Tari Eason news is somewhat important as well. He's been questionable last few games, hasn't played. If he gets ruled out, I do think that Cam Whitmore would be viable, 4.2K. No, he got extended last game. Actually, he didn't. No, he did. He did in the blowout. He got extended there. But I think he would be viable in tournaments if Tari Eason gets rolled out, just because I think that the minutes would be high enough to make him in consideration. In the first half, Houston ran a pretty tight rotation. They gave their starters a lot of run. You saw a one rotation for Steven Adams, a little bit of Jason Tate, a little bit of Reed Shepherd, and then Whitmore was the guy that played the most off the bench. So if Eason's out, I do think that Whitmore is playable too. If Eason's in and there's no limitations, a 4.8K Tari Eason, I think, would be in play too. But no one else getting any love. I think it's kind of hard to get to their main guys like Şengün, Van Vliet, Jalen Green, Jabari Smith. But yeah, I think Thompson is definitely the preferred option there. And he's only getting about 5%. So I like going overweight to him.
Yeah, they all look solid. That's not a fun way to do it. The good news is a lot of the news and best options are coming up in the later games. So it does set you up well to backload and swap as you need, which is helpful. It would not be fun if this Golden State Clippers game was the 7:00 start or something.
Definitely not.
I don't have anything else for Minnesota or Houston, but I can say this. I want to watch this game. I want you guys to watch this read for the NFL Max package, which you guys can get for $179 for the rest of the NFL season, all the way to the Super Bowl. It's 179 bones if you use the promo code CELEBRATE. We needed to run another deal. We keep having Millie winners, guys. So the more Millie winners we get, the more deals you guys can get. You can click the link in the description of this video or use the promo code CELEBRATE when you check out for the NFL Sims Max package. This will cover projections, ownership, our entire sim tool package, premium Discord, and more. Everything you could possibly want for NFL DFS, showdowns, all the playoff slates, whatever you're looking for, we've got you covered. And it's $179. It's the only thing you're going to pay all the way through the Super Bowl. So take advantage, guys. Come on in. Water's fine. Memphis Grizzlies, 8-point favorites in New Orleans, 237 total. This is the fastest game on the slate and tied for the highest total on the slate. And we don't have anything too crazy going on, at least on the Memphis side. I thought maybe we could see something crazy, but it's really just Santi Aldama being out for today. Marcus Smart continues to be out. Jay Huff is questionable. I don't know how much that means now that Zach Edey's playing increased minutes, but we shall see. Around 15% ownership to Morant, Triple J, and Zach Edey, and some scattered ownership to Brandon Clark, Desmond Bane, and Jalen Wells. Of the guys that are getting that love of Morant, Triple J, and Edey, do you prefer one more than the others?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a 5K Zach Edey. The minutes have been solid for him of late. Again, he's been starting. And one thing to note with Edey, too, is he will usually, if the game gets out of hand, he will come back in and close in a blowout, too. So, like, he's kind of blowout proof, whether the game stays competitive or not. Like, he came back in, the game was a massive blowout against Toronto. And he came back in and played the last, 5 minutes of the fourth quarter with kind of the scrubs there. So, wanted to note that. I think Edey is one of the better point per dollar plays at center today. Jaren and Ja, the other two, getting love, 7.1 for Jaren and 8.6K for Ja. I think, they're both fine options. I don't think I'm going to really prioritize them. Even with Aldama out, Memphis probably still runs 10 guys. So those guys are reasonable plays, but they don't stand out to me. And then two other guys to mention. I think Brandon Clark and Jalen Wells are interesting value plays. Brandon Clark, I would feel better about if Jay Huff gets rolled out, just because I'd feel pretty confident that he would play most of the back of 5 minutes. You could get a little bit of Jaren at the 5, but that would make me like Clark a little bit more. And then Jalen Wells. So last game with Aldama out, he played 24 minutes in the first 3 quarters. And then never came back as the blowout, but he definitely could have played around 30 minutes. So I think Wells is an interesting value option there. I don't think I would get to anyone else. I mean, I guess Desmond Bane is reasonable too, coming in around 6%. He's got the shooting guard, small forward eligibility. I think LaRavia probably gets a slight bump up in minutes as well. I think it's him and Wells that probably benefit the most with Aldama out, but still with the way that Memphis runs their rotation, it's not like they're going to see massive minutes bump. But yeah, so I think on Memphis overall, I think Edey would probably be my favorite play.
No problems with that one. I kind of think I prefer Jaren Jackson Jr. the most, just because of that power forward eligibility. But I have all three of those guys, Morant, Jackson, and Edey, very similar. It just so happens that center is pretty easy to fill on a day like today. You've got Claxton out there. You've got plenty of center options. It's obviously a Jokic/Wemby slate if you want it to be. Not that I have any sort of problem whatsoever getting to Zach Edey. I'm glad you pointed out the Brandon Clark piece with Jay Huff, because if Huff is available today, I would not want to take Brandon Clark, because I just don't know what they're going to do if Jay Huff plays, if they want to go to more Jay Huff and keep that stretchability and not go to Clark. That's on the table. So I would not want to have Brandon Clark in a lineup unless I knew Jay Huff was out. If he's in, it's tough, because then we really just don't know what they're doing at the 5 at that point. Well, New Orleans. So Jordan Hawkins is available to play, which I think is kind of interesting, because this is a weird team today. No one is in double digits in ownership on DraftKings. The most we got was CJ McCollum at 9. On FanDuel, Herb Jones is 12, DeJounte Murray's 15, McCollum's 12, Yves Missy's 15. I almost said 15 because of Missy. That was tricky. And then 25 to Trey Murphy, because these guys just have either better positions, better prices, or just more advantageous for the way that FanDuel has their positions. As I look at the Pels, it's basically everything I said about the Knicks and the Pacers here. If I could get one of Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Murray, McCollum, Messi to a degree, I'm okay with those guys showing up in lineups. I don't see anybody that's a priority here, and I really don't like getting anybody going up against this really good Memphis team.
Yeah, I think like DeJounte Murray is a reasonable contrarian option right now. I don't love the price point on him, but like he has really not shot well this year. On the season with Zion and Ingram off the court, he's a 1.22 fantasy point per minute player. Like in a competitive game, he's probably playing mid 30s minutes or so. So I think DeJounte is a reasonable contrarian play. CJ's getting the most love at 7.2K. Again, like that's a fine last piece in, but I'm definitely not going to go out of my way to prioritize him. I wish Jordan Hawkins was cheaper because he is someone I think could get extended here. But at 4.7K, I think it's kind of tough. Like last game, he shot really bad, 1 of 8 and got benched. The game before that, though, he played 34 minutes, played extremely well. I just think with the price point where it's at, I think it's really hard to go there. So don't think you can do that. Yeah, Trey Murphy, a little less than 10% owned is fine. I think it's pretty hard to go to Messi with all the good center plays that we have in the slate. Yeah. So nothing really else for me for New Orleans.
No, it's tough. I hate that this team sucks right now. I thought they were going to be like legitimately a 50-win team, and then it just all went up in flames. They are currently the worst record in basketball. They are worse than Washington right now.
Wait, are you serious?
They are 5-26. Washington is 5-23.
Wow, I did not know that. I mean, I knew they were bad. I didn't know they were that bad.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It's pretty rough. So, maybe New Orleans ends up with the number 1 pick. Maybe Cooper Flagg's on his way to New Orleans. It went so well with Zion as getting a Duke guy to New Orleans. It's just, I don't know what they're going to look like next year, but it's going to be a lot different than what we're seeing this year in terms of what their roster is. Cool. Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday remain questionable. Why even announce that? That's not even news.
Yeah.
It's not news.
Ugh.
Brutal. All right, game 6. Cleveland and Denver. If Minnesota, Houston's not your bag, Cleveland and Denver should be. Cavs are 3-point favorites in Denver, 237 total. So big old total. Second fastest game. Actually, not the second. Yeah, second fastest game on the slate. Basically the highest total. For Cleveland, we are waiting officially on the status of Dean Wade, although he did go through shoot around. So by all accounts, it seems like we're going to get him in. 7% ownership to Mitchell, 7 to Garland, 6 to Allen, 14 to Mobley. I think Cleveland looks like slightly better versions of New York and Indy and New Orleans for me. Nobody that I want to go crazy on, but any one of those 4 guys look good. And a lot of it is just because we see Cleveland beat the shit out of everybody so frequently that all of these starter minutes are down. If they're ever going to not be down, 3-point favorites in Denver seems like the type of matchup where you can get an extra, 2 minutes across the board to all of those guys. Are you getting to any Cleveland?
Yeah, I like this team for tournaments a good amount. Donovan Mitchell coming in around 7%, I think is a really good tournament play. This Denver defense has not been great, and they're going to be even worse with Aaron Gordon out. So I like some of these main pieces. I think Mitchell, probably the guy I like the most. He does have the shooting guard eligibility as well. I'm glad you mentioned the blowouts. I've been involved in a ton of blowouts recently. I think in a competitive game, you can definitely see some of these main guys push for 35 plus minutes. So I'm pretty high on Donovan Mitchell for tournaments. I also mentioned Jared Allen. The minutes have not been great on Jared Allen, but in the most recent game against Denver, he played 35 minutes. And I think that makes sense, right? Just for defense against Jokic. So would not be surprised if Allen gets extended a bit. 6K for him, I think makes it a reasonable GBP play. Evan Mobley's been shooting extremely well. He's getting the most love. I think he's firmly in play. I don't hate Darius Garland. I think the values where it's kind of tougher to get to with the Nets and Golden State we'll talk about in a bit. Some of the other value plays as well. But I think any of those main 4 guys look pretty good for tournaments. I think Donovan Mitchell being the preferred option. But yeah, I would not be shocked if Jared Allen plays 35 minutes in this game.
Nope, not at all. I'm with you there. They're going to be throwing whatever they can at Jokic. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we got a small rotation out of Tristan Thompson if he's available. I didn't actually check that. I was just speaking. Yeah, I would not be surprised at all if he played 4 minutes just to throw a body at Jokic for if anybody's getting into foul trouble, you just throw him out there. It's like, hey man, you could eat a bunch of this. It's like, don't worry, just play aggressive. It doesn't matter. Olrat hit us with a member message. Rank Pajemski, Tyrese Martin, Laravia, Shake Milton, and Jalen Wells. Thanks, Olrat.
I would say probably Shake Milton number one.
Yeah.
Pajemski would depend on if he starts. I would like him a lot better if he starts. I'm not sure if he starts. So
agreed. I don't think he's starting right now, but I'm not even going to bother trying to predict what Steve Kerr's going to do today.
We'll talk about that. But I have no idea who's going to start for Golden State.
I think I would go Shake Milton, Martin, Pajemski, Wells, Laravia.
Yep.
But
I think
I'm pretty confident that Shake is number one. You could really just put those other four guys in any order until we know if Pajemski's starting. If Pajemski's starting, then he would be one, but we might not know that until after we've already locked Shake Milton. But if he's not starting, honestly, like they all look pretty similar. Whew. It's a tough one. So Denver, Jamal Murray, owner of what I believe might be the worst contract in basketball. 15% owned on DraftKings, 15% owned on FanDuel. Nikola Jokic, 11-8, most expensive player on the slate, 25% owned on DraftKings, close to 20 on FanDuel. And then nothing else. Michael Porter Jr., 7. Everybody else is below that. I thought we might see a little bit of value on Peyton Watson, but he's 4,400, not the best per minute guy. I thought we could create something with no Aaron Gordon, but it doesn't appear that that's happening. And it appears that we just need to get to Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. So before I ask you if you like Jokic, because it's Jokic, clearly the answer is yes to some degree. Who do you prefer between he and Wemby?
That's a good question. I think it's still Jokic, even though he's getting more ownership, but it's close. Like I do like Wemby as a contrarian play, but yeah, I think I would lean Jokic. But that's a tough one. It's a good question. As far as the rest of Denver goes, Jamal Murray getting a little over 10% ownership. I think he's going a little bit over owned. You've seen the minutes on Westbrook tick up, which has kind of hurt the production there for Jamal Murray. So I think he's fine, but maybe going a little bit over owned. I do think Michael Porter Jr. is a reasonable contrarian play. With Aaron Gordon out, you should see a bump up in minutes. There was a stretch when Gordon was out where MPJ was consistently playing high 30s minutes. So I think he's a reasonable contrarian play. As you mentioned, Peyton Watson is most likely going to start here for Aaron Gordon. 4.4K though, I don't love the price point on him. So yeah, nothing really else to mention here. Jokic, obviously the best play for Denver, but I think everyone knows that.
I would prefer Jokic to Wemby. I would not be upset at all if either one of them were in a lineup. Both of those guys confirmed good. Top two guys in the Darko projection model now. Jokic number one, Wemby number two of just raw talent, that's hard to do it as a second year guy to race all the way to the top and catch someone like Jason Tatum, catch someone like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. It's fun to see. So I'm happy about it. But yeah, get me Jokic. Murray's minutes are the reason that it's interesting here, but man, he is just not very good right now. And I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, he's been struggling. So I don't know.
I mean, 57% at the rim. His true shooting's down 5%. He's shooting 35% from three after being at 40 for 3 out of the last 4 years. Only one of those years that he wasn't at 40 was the year that he missed the entire season. He's shooting less threes at this point. He's getting to the rim less. Oh, by the way, 4 more years of this deal, 46 million next year, 50, 54, 57 and a half. Yikes.
Yeah, Yikes. Not great. Not great with the production, with the way he's playing right now.
No, not at all. 2 games to go. Make sure you're hitting that like button. Let's run that like number up a little bit higher, everybody, so those live before lock guys can enjoy themselves. Dallas and Phoenix. Mavs are 1.5 point dogs in Phoenix, 225 total. Derek Lively is questionable. That could create a ton of value if he happens to be out, because Daniel Gafford will start looking pretty damn good. But Luka Doncic is already out. And I thought it would create a little bit more throughout the rest of the team. It hasn't. It's 20-something% ownership to Kyrie Irving on DK. He's only 7 on FanDuel because he's $1,100 more expensive. PJ Washington getting a little love on FanDuel because he's cheaper, but it's kind of Kyrie and nothing else unless you want to pre-plan for Gafford.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. 8.3K for Kyrie, I think makes him look a pretty good play. With Luka Doncic off the court this year, 1.24 fantasy point per minute player. So obviously like the ceiling on Kyrie, he's got shooting guard eligibility as well. I think Gafford is still fine in tournaments, even if Lively plays. But I'm glad you mentioned that. Like, this is a really interesting slate for late swap because we have the Lively news and then we have the question of like, what is Golden State going to do with the starting lineup? So, backloading your lineup, I think is not a bad idea here for tournaments because like if we get news that Lively gets rolled out late, like Gafford becomes like a smash play. So I think he would probably play like 25-ish minutes. And then you get like Klebo/Dwight Powell playing the backup five, but like Gafford would look really good in that scenario. And then starting lineup, do you think they're going to go Dinwiddie in the starting lineup? So they did that a couple games ago with Luka out.
I'm not assuming that it's Dinwiddie.
Okay.
My assumption for the starting lineup is going to be Kyrie, Grimes, Clay, PJ, and then whichever center. Lively if he's in, Gafford if he's out. Okay.
Yeah, and then like just to mention it too, like Jaden Hardy is available. I'm not even sure if he plays, but that does, I think, make the minutes a little bit riskier for guys like Grimes and Dinwiddie. But their price points are up, so I think it's kind of hard to go there anyway. But definitely keep an eye on the Lively news. It could open up a really good play in Daniel Gafford.
Yeah. I mean, Gafford, 4,200, over a 1.1 fantasy point per minute guy. If Lively happens to be out and any sort of additional minutes you're giving to Gafford is going to make him look really, really good. And he's probably the best center on the slate if Lively happens to be out.
Yep, for sure.
Same page there. But pay attention to that starting lineup and that Lively news. Those are both really big decision points that could allow you major swaps or just if you try to get it right to start. For Phoenix, no Devin Booker, no Grayson Allen, no real ownership. 15% to Durant on DraftKings, no more than 5 to anybody else. Bradley Beal is 6,900 on FanDuel. He got to 25%, 15% on FanDuel. So what do you want to do with Durant?
I like KD, 9.3K, getting a little over 10% ownership, as you mentioned. With Devin Booker off the court this year, 1.41 fantasy point per minute player. Like he's playing big minutes right now in competitive games. So I think KD looks like a really solid spend up. No issue with him at all. And then Brad Beal, the potential assists have ticked up a little bit on him, 7.4K. He's getting like basically no ownership. I think he's fine for tournaments. I think Nurkic is always in play for GPPs. The range of outcomes for him is relatively wide. Not a guarantee to play big minutes. Like they can go other directions. They go Plumlee. They can go Oso. But, he does have 30-plus minutes in his range of outcomes. Potential assists have ticked up for him a little bit as well with Devin Booker off the court. So wanted to mention that. Nothing else I don't think I'll get to for Phoenix. But, yeah, I think KD looks like a good play. I think he's going a little bit under-owned right now.
Kristaps Porzingis out. Drew Holiday out.
Ooh, all right. So we're going to have to get some Celtics then. Ugh.
Boston looking a little bit better now. At least it's a 7:30 start, but not that it matters. Yeah, I mean, everybody for Boston just looks a little bit better than they did before. So be ready for it, everybody. Man, this Dallas Phoenix game could have been really awesome if Luka and Devin Booker were in, but now it's just kind of the lesser version of it. Finally, the Golden State Warriors on the road in LA, taking on the Clippers. 5-point dogs, 212 total. A lot of ownership coming in here. Hard to talk about the game, though. For Golden State, no Steph, no Gary Payton, and by all accounts, no Draymond, who is doubtful at this point. 30% ownership to Schroeder, 30% ownership to Kuminga, 15 to Wiggins, Podziemski, Trace Jackson-Davis, and another 10 to Buddy Hield. I'm just going to open it up to you. What are the things you like here for the Warriors?
Yeah, well, so number one, we'll have to keep an eye on the starting lineup. There's a lot of different directions this could go. My guess for the starting lineup, and this could be completely wrong, is Dennis Schroeder, Buddy Hield, Wiggins, Kuminga, and Jackson Davis. But it could go so many different ways. Schroeder and Kuminga getting the most love, and I agree. 5.3K and 5.5, I think both look really good. This team needs offense. Obviously, both those guys are going to get a bump of minutes as well. So I think those guys look really good. Buddy Hield at 4.2K. Depends on the starting lineup. I like him a lot better if he starts. The reason I think he could start is just that this team needs shooting, right? So I don't know if like Podziemski starting alongside Schroeder would make a ton of sense. So I think Buddy Hield right now at about 10% ownership is a pretty interesting play. And then the center position, I think, is pretty interesting for Golden State, too. So Jackson Davis is getting a good amount of ownership, coming in around 15%. But I think Kevon Looney is kind of sneaky here. I would not be shocked if he gets extended. In their one game they played against the Clippers this year, Jackson Davis started, only played 16 minutes. Looney played 20 minutes off the bench. That was a game that Draymond did play. Draymond is out, so you're probably going to get close to 48 minutes, I would assume, from Jackson Davis and Looney. And with Looney getting no ownership, I think he's kind of sneaky in tournaments. I think there's even an outside chance he could start against Ivica Zubac. So wanted to mention that. But yeah, Wiggins looks good. Podziemski is getting some ownership. I would like him better if he starts. Keep an eye on that. He's still fine off the bench at 4K. And then like Slow-Mo, I think, will get dusted off. You'll probably see some Moses Moody, but I just can't wait to get trolled from Steve Kerr. And you're going to see like a ton of minutes for like Lindy Waters or Guy Santos. So I'm not looking forward to this with this being the late game, but you're definitely going to need some Warriors exposure for sure.
Yeah, like the Schroeder, Wiggins, Kuminga pieces, those seem pretty easy to me. I just think those minutes aren't really going anywhere. I'm happy to get to a lot of them. Hield and Podziemski are sort of context dependent whether they start. Not that they're bad plays if they don't, but like you feel better about the guy that starts. I think Kyle Anderson is the sneakiest guy on Golden State today. They need somebody that can create and run this offense. I guess they think that could be Dennis Schroeder. It could be, but this is sort of what Kyle Anderson is like made for right now. So I would not be surprised if he got a little bit more than we were expecting today. Small forward, power forward eligible, 3,100. It's like a 0.9, 0.95 guy. So you don't need a ton out of him, but he's the guy that I have my eye on as the sneaky guy. Although I share your sentiment on Kevon Looney. Like this could be a spot where he just plays a shit ton of minutes here against Zubac.
Yeah, usually against like bigger teams, Kerr leans on Looney. Like against Jokic, Looney played, I think it was like 25, 26 minutes. So that's why I think he's kind of interesting with Jackson Davis getting good chunk of ownership right now.
And then on the Clippers side, we do have a Q tag on KPJ. Norm Powell's getting around 10%. Harden's around 10. Zubac is around 10. Chris Dunn is around 10. I kind of think KPJ is the best option of anybody here if he happened to play, but that's a tough sell for a 10 o'clock game. They kind of remind me of the Knicks and Indiana and all those other teams that I comp to them, Minnesota, Houston. Like it's like 4 or 5 guys that are all perfect as last guys in.
Yep. Basically, I was going to say the same thing. If Kevin Porter Jr. gets ruled out, I think you'll probably feel a little bit better about the minutes for Chris Dunn. He's 3.8K, fair value play. Like obviously, if you want to get to Harden or Zubac, I think that's fine. Both coming in. Well, Zubac's coming in around 7%. Yeah, they're both coming in around 10% or so. Norm Powell, the minutes have ticked up on him, but he's up to 7.3K. You'll find last man in, but you're definitely not going to prioritize him. I don't think I'm going to get to the value of like Coffey or Derek Jones Jr. with just like the Nets and Warriors value that we talked about. So I don't think it's necessary to go there. But I think Dunn, Harden, Powell, Zubac, all fine plays.
DK, tell the people where to find you.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter, DK__DFS, or on YouTube, DK_DFS.
There we go, everybody. NBA Live Before Lock coming up next, and then we're heading to playback. Greg and Eric, come on down, boys. Water's fine. What's going on?
What's up, guys? Yeah, so I am just waiting on this Boston Celtics update to see where the ownership and the projections land. Then I'm going to be rerunning stuff here. So we got something for Eric and I to talk about right out of the gate that you guys weren't able to hit on your show.
Yeah, there's a lot going on today, man. It's a wild one. They're all spread out, too.
Yeah, so you guys, you've overstayed your welcome. You're 4 minutes over. Get out of here. Get out of here. See you in,
Good luck in the 2,500, DK. Good luck.
Yeah, I'll definitely be losing, but we'll see how it goes.
Congratulations on the crowns. That's well done.
All right, see you guys
later.
All right, so it is time for Live Before Lock. Myself and Eric here. If you guys could do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you do have any questions for us and you're in our Discord channel, hit me up. As per usual, I'll be looking out for any questions you guys have from Discord. And yeah, I mentioned it right there, Eric. We've got some news that broke just a few minutes ago, and it is the Boston Celtics, which not really massively surprising. I think different teams approach the injury report differently. LeBron and Anthony Davis being questionable, it's very different than, say, Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday being questionable. When you see teams like the Lakers listing guys questionable, they're probably more on the probable side. You see guys from the Celtics being listed questionable, they're probably more on the doubtful side. That's what we ended up happening here. But right out of the gate, what is your instant reaction to Porzingis and Drew Holiday being out for the Boston Celtics? And then once we get some projection updates and ownership updates, we'll throw this up on screen. We'll show you guys what our data is saying. But what's your first reaction?
Yeah, first reaction is just kind of going to the center position and seeing what we potentially have, because we've seen like the Cornet and Queta thing back and forth. I look at the lineup, like the starting lineup against Indy, and with Siakam and Turner, I think it ends up being Horford, Cornet. And if that's going to be the case, I think Luke Cornet, we have so many of these like 5K centers that we want to play on today's slate. And I love this slate for what it's worth. It's 8 games, all of them on the entire night. That rarely happens these days. We kind of have a dud in the early going here with Knicks Orlando. There are a couple of pieces we can mine out of that one if we really, really want to. But for the most part, I'm going to be way underweight to that game and just kind of waiting for news to break. And we have tons of late swap stuff. But Boston kind of puts a wrench into it, because if you get a Luke Cornet starting 4K for him, I mean, 26 minutes, 27 minutes against Indy, that seems pretty fun for me. But we have so many of these like mid-range center plays. Jared Allen at 6K, I think for tournaments going up against Jokic, heard at the tail end of that last show, somebody that I've had my eye on. Zach Edey with his current play, 5K going up against a fellow rookie in Evis Missy, who's also kind of in play-ish. And then Daniel Gafford, who could end up being the nuts at 4,200 if you get Lively out. But that's where I see Luke Cornet. If he ends up being the starter, I mean, against Indy, everything's kind of in play. And then obviously the Peyton Pritchard piece. You have all these other pieces that are going to take a big, big step up here. Derek White specifically is going to be taking a big step up for me here as well. But it's just such an interesting slate knowing how much news we still have waiting in the wings.
One thing here, go and join Playback, Eric, so I can
Sure.
hear your opinions there as well. And interesting, none of them complained that you're not there for, there we go, Dan06, he brought it up, no Eric in Playback. So I was going to say, they didn't even notice you were gone there, but I figured they must have been confused when I asked you a question and there was just no response there. So yeah, go ahead and jump in Playback so they can hear you there as well. Jacob, if you can message me in Discord, or sorry, Slack, shoot me a message to let me know. There's a handful of super chats sitting here. I just want to know which ones were answered during the deep dive and which ones were not. Otherwise, though, shout out to SC, who gifted out 10 YouTube memberships. I did see that one come across while we were on here, so I know that that was one that was not addressed by Josh and DK. And then Christopher Key Cash says, thank you for all your work. This crew is the best. So Christopher, thank you very much for your support as well. And for everybody else, the absolute easiest way to support us is to like the video, subscribe to the channel, or sign up for any subscription at Stokastic. Link down below in the YouTube description box. Sign up for any of our packages, or take advantage of our link join offer, where if you sign up for any of our affiliate partners, for each one you sign up for, you get 1 free month of core access to a sport of your choosing. Dustin Stringer says none was answered. All right. Well, I'm getting different information from the producer here, so we'll see here. But Jacob says this is the last one they got to, so I assume that means that they answered all the previous questions. And just throw that into Slack if you could, Jacob. I'm gonna take that to assume that they answered all the ones prior to that. So the question here was rank these. All right, so it looks like they answered all of them then, if that's the case. Eric, you had mentioned that there are a lot of potential pieces that you're waiting on news for. I'm curious because we do have most of the injury information at this point. We're waiting on Derek Lively, Kevin Porter Jr., Dorian Finney-Smith, Tari Eason, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Of those guys, what's most important to you for injury news that you're waiting on?
I guess it's not even injury news that we have. It's the starting lineup for Golden State. So I guess I'll put Kevin Porter Jr. in just by default because of that game and that game environment. Obviously, it would make Chris Dunn a little bit more interesting. You probably get some minutes dusted off for like a Jordan Miller, things like that. But for the most part, it'll just solidify Chris Dunn's role, I think, for LA. Not a great fantasy producer here at times, but can spike an upside and obviously is very, very cheap. I'm just going to say the Golden State lineup because that is a game that's on an island. If we don't get it before 9 p.m. Eastern time, which I'm kind of assuming we don't, you have to make some calculated guesses based on what you've got in your lineups. And I want to ask you who you think starts, because I think what's really throwing me off is that Kyle Anderson started on the 21st against the Timberwolves, his former team. So there was a little bit of familiarity there, maybe, where Steve Kerr I mean, Steve Kerr, you never know what's going through his head or what reasoning he's giving for dusting off certain players at certain times. We've seen massive minutes, whomever starts for like a Lindy Waters, but on December 21st, we only got 17 minutes out of Kyle Anderson in that starting lineup, and Jonathan Kuminga came off the bench and played a majority there. They ended up going on a run, won by 10, did some good things there, but obviously Steph Curry was in for that one, and you kind of need the ball handling out there. You need somebody creating. You need Dennis Schroeder, who's going to be probably doing a lot of that, but he's already owned. Who else do you think starts? Because I do think Kyle Anderson probably more likely to start over Jonathan Kuminga, and I think it makes sense as a Kevon Looney spot.
Yeah, so we have also seen that Steve Kerr doesn't seem to like Kuminga all that much. Yep. I mean, he in code speaks in the media about Kuminga where he's like, hey, we have to do better about our shot selection. And then he won't say any names, but he'll reference a play specifically that Kuminga made during the game, or we'll talk about mid-range jump shots, which is always references here to Kuminga. So I tend to agree with you. I don't know that Kyle Anderson plays a ton of minutes, but I think he's the most likely person to move into the starting lineup.
I do too. And that just kind of dilutes a lot of what we could potentially have for value. Like, now, Trace Jackson-Davis at 4,300. If we get Luke Cornett starting at 4K, I'm going to be very interested to see kind of what the push and pull effect is at the center position specifically. I think it's easier to manufacture some value. Like, we have Chris Dunn, who you could basically give a boost up to, and you have a little bit more workability with those pieces in the late window of games. There's nothing that I'm saying right now is like, oh, Hulk slam dunk, got to play it here on the Golden State side. And yet we could get Lindy Waters starting at 3K flat. We could get, Kyle Anderson. If he ends up starting, I'll probably take a decent number of shots on him still. And if Kevon Looney starts at 3,800, I mean, the rebound rate is just insane for him every single time out. And if he walks into more minutes and they're going to play him alongside Zubats, because I'm assuming Zubats is one of the better tournament plays if you get Trace Jackson-Davis out there, not known for his defense coming out of Indiana. Trace Jackson-Davis, I very much think Zubats is somebody I want to give a little boost up to in the Sims as well. It's just such an interesting late night hammer and kind of puts a little bit of this slate into context for us where it's like, all right, there's nothing that's great, but you kind of want to take shots on anybody that ends up in that starting lineup.
Are you surprised the game is on the slate? Because they've generally not been, especially DraftKings, FanDuel, they've more often than not included the late games, but on some of the more recent slates, they haven't included some of the super late games. I wasn't even expecting that Golden State Warriors game to be on the DraftKings slate. I thought it wasn't even going to end up mattering when we first found out that Steph was going to be resting.
Yeah, we had two games that started at 9 p.m. Eastern time, 6 p.m. Pacific. I think that probably made it more inclined for them to say, we'll throw out a 3-game late night slate. I think that's what ended up happening. I haven't registered for any of the late night slate stuff, but I do know that we've seen at times where they just wrapped everything together, like on a Tuesday, on Wednesdays where you have like 11 games and then 3 late. Like we've had a couple of these slates. I mean, the whole NBA schedule has been insane lately, so it's hard to like really identify a specific spot. It's just been complete disarray, but we're going to get some stability back into our lives in the post NBA Cup era.
Yeah. And until, we say that, and then today it'll be like a gazillion people get ruled out right before lock.
That'll be fun.
Normal standard procedures. We do have projections updates for the Boston Celtics here. So Jacob, if you wouldn't mind, throw the Boston Celtics on screen so Eric and I could look at those projections updates. I'm really interested to see what we did with the cheaper guys as far as playing time goes. And then we'll look at the ownership as well on DraftKings and FanDuel after this. First reaction here, we've got Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. They're both projected for a couple more fantasy points, so they become more viable options. I had some exposure to them before, and I assume now I'm going to have, 5 to 10% more of each of those guys on the cheaper end, or I should say the mid-range. Derek White, 35.5 fantasy points at $6,800. You got Peyton Pritchard, just under 29 fantasy points at $5,700. We got Al Horford, 26.5 fantasy points at $5K. Here's what we did with the cheap guys. 23.5 minutes to Luke Cornett. That makes him viable, but not great. We've got 23.5 minutes to Sam Hauser. Same sort of deal. Makes him viable, but probably not all desirable. And then Keita also giving him 16 minutes at $3,900 doesn't really make him a strong option. Then nobody else meaningful enough minutes to really be somebody we should expect to contribute from a DFS angle. Considering this information, Eric, anything change about your opinions on the Boston Celtics players or anything look different than what you were expecting?
No, I thought Tatum would end up being pretty popular as a spend up. Look at center today. I mean, normally we get value or something. I don't even really know like how I feel about any piece, like individual piece on Golden State, and yet 1, 2, 3 of them, and Pajemski, Dennis Schroeder, Jonathan Kuminga, Fields getting to a ton of. And again, somebody's got to shoot the basketball, somebody's got to play, and they're all sub 5,500 or less. So it's definitely a spot where I think Jason Tatum now, with the positionality, small forward, power forward, he doesn't touch any of those specifically. Like Tatum, you can play small forward, Kuminga power forward, so like it's fine. And then the other ones are guards. I guess I'm a little bit surprised. I thought Derek White would take a little bit more of a bump up, and Peyton Pritchard, goes from being somebody that you would want basically none of to like you can certainly take a shot or two in large field on Peyton Pritchard. We know what that upside can be in games that they're running away with. Indy's obviously a spot they can still run away with this current construction with Tatum and Brown both in. I'm curious what you're going to get to here too, because again, Derek White sub 8%, I think looks really good in large field. I think Brown and Tatum about where I thought they would land.
Considering that if you look at our center minutes, it's not all 48 going to Kornet and Queta. There's also other guys that are expected to play some center minutes, like Al Horford, for instance. I thought that I was potentially going to have a little bit more interest in Luke Kornet, and I haven't actually run Sims. I'm in the process of doing that right now. But I don't think I'm going to be getting very much exposure to the cheaper guys from the Celtics, but kind of across the board. It's Tatum, Brown, White, Pritchard, Horford. They were all guys I had some interest in before. And like I said, they just become guys that I'm going to be liking a little bit more now. If I could only roster one Celtic tonight, it would be Jason Tatum.
Yeah, it's going to be Tatum purely because of the fantasy points he's going to give you. And we're going to get something from Brooklyn that's going to look good. We're going to get something from Golden State that we're going to want to take shots on. That isn't just those core three guys I brought up a second ago. So yeah, I'm with you. I mean, Tatum, when you get the raw points like this at a position that is a little bit more barren, I mean, that's the big thing about this slate is Jokic and Wemby at center. I mean, it's kind of just an insane slate to try to pick who you want out of the bucket, because we still have like Şengün's probably going to be way underowned. We're going to get Zubats, who I think could just destroy the soul of Trace Jackson Davis if he ends up out there starting. Nick Claxton, the most popular play on the entire slate next to Tatum here now. I mean, there's just so many good centers to be playing today. And yet the two highest raw projections by a pretty wide margin are at center as well. So Tatum, he's going to slide into lineups and be kind of that cornerstone building block for everybody now.
Yeah, certainly going to be for me. I'm like I said, I'm rerunning Sims right now. I think he's going to be my most rostered spend up option now. Same for you, or is there somebody else who you think you might prefer to Tatum?
I mean, no. So hard. I mean, I still think Kyrie is probably underrepresented at 8,300, even at 23%. I know we have him a little bit over-owned. I would argue maybe should be a little bit higher owned, but I would say out of anybody 9K and above, yeah, Tatum I'm definitely going to have the most of.
Yeah, I'll see if anything is different here as I ran the contest generator, got the Sims running now. So if you wouldn't mind, Jacob, can you put the ownership up on screen? Actually, first go to, we've already got it up. Yeah, so go to just Boston. Just look at the Celtics, guys, so we can isolate them. All right, Boston Celtics. Yeah, Tatum, 44% owned. Jaylen Brown, 30% owned. I'll tell you what, Eric, if we're actually only going to be getting 7.6% of Derek White, I love that as a GPP play.
That's what I was saying. I think that's the one that really stood out to me. Again, the Kornet thing makes sense when there's so many good center plays. I also think this is one of those where we might be spreading the minutes out a little bit, and then we'll get an update once we get the confirmed starter. Because there's a world, I'd say it's like 75%, 80% that we get Kornet starting, but there's like a 20% chance it ends up being Queta. So, maybe we take a minute or two, go that direction. I might get a little bit more, but for the most part, I didn't expect him to be popular. Just somebody that I think walks in from a role where they're not even out there to being out there quite a bit. And that's at least interesting on any slate. And then, I'm with you. Derek White, I just thought he would take more of a bump up. I've got him just a little bit. I have him better projected than we do by a little bit of a margin where it's going to be like, I'm going to get to 20% Derek White pretty easily.
Yeah, just reran Sims. And the pay up I have the most of now, it is Jason Tatum, which I thought was going to end up being the case here. And then as far as the other Boston players,
what do you think about Sam Hauser? Like Sam Hauser, these are the kind of games where Sam Hauser gets hot and goes out there and gets more run than you're thinking. And all of a sudden he's 4,200. I mean, we've seen this how many times where, I mean, all he does is go out there and shoot threes. Him and Peyton Pritchard, they just go out and shoot threes, whether it's like Brooklyn, 35 minutes against them there. I mean, there's no rules really for Sam Hauser out there. I mean, if he gets hot, they could give him more run than Horford. They can go small ball against Indy, especially, it's less likely, I would assume, with Obi Toppin out. Like if Obi Toppin was out there, they could play Tatum at the 5 and do some different stuff. But I'm assuming with Miles Turner / Thomas Bryant being the majority of those 5 minutes, we probably see more traditional type lineups. But again, Boston's Boston. They're the better team by a landslide. They can kind of do whatever they want.
Yeah, I want to see the actual numbers for Derek White with Porzingis and Jrue Holiday off the court this year. We should have a pretty decent sample size on that, because I just ran my first run of Sims and got less than 10% of Derek White, and I'm not all that happy with it. So I want to see if my intuition that he should be maybe he just doesn't benefit as much as we think he does with those guys off the court. So going to look at the actual numbers.
I've got it right now here too. Let me get this all situated for you here. Over the course of this season, Derek White, 1.07 DraftKings points per minute, 370 minute sample size, 23% usage, 61.7% true shooting, 38% from 3. And that's with Porzingis and Jrue both off the floor.
All right, so it doesn't really impact him all that much then, because those are pretty similar to his numbers with both of them on the court.
Yeah, it's more of like, I mean, Derek White is one of those guys that, I mean, he can play 40 minutes in a spot like this too. I mean, if this game gets completely out of hand, he played 33 minutes on Christmas, played 40 against Orlando, 34 minutes per game on the season. I mean, it's more of just like shoring up the minutes where, like, sometimes Peyton Pritchard gets hot, Sam Hauser gets hot, you get one of those guys hot, and it can kind of lead away from minutes to Jrue Holiday or Derek White. With one of those main guys out, I think Derek White basically is playing 36 minutes in a lot of situations where, they can maybe trail out towards the end in a blowout. Like, I think it just shores up his minutes in a way where I just want to play more than 8% of him against Indy.
Yeah, I might give him a little bit of a boost here, but I was thinking he'd be a guy get 20 to 30% of, but then looking at the numbers and it's, you're getting per 36 minutes an extra 1 fantasy point out of him. I do hear you though, that it could mean he gets a couple of extra minutes here. Derek White, I will make sure I'm overweight to the field, assuming that he maintains the 7% projected ownership, but I don't think I'm going to go crazy with Derek White exposure. Jason Tatum, on the other hand, looks like I'm going to have a lot of him.
Yeah, it's a positionality thing. And I see, I chuck up the deuces, Memphis and Denver pace. No, who was it that brought it up? Trey. Yeah, I mean, if Tatum is going to shoot up in an ownership, it makes me like Jokic and Wemby even more. Not really. I think it's really weird. Like, obviously, if 50% of the field is going to play Tatum, there's definitely less salary to go around. But, like, there's just so many good center plays, and you need not just those ceilings from those guys, but like you need kind of a floor from Tatum, and then you need the massive 80 burger from Wemby like we got on Christmas Day. You just need so many things to kind of break their direction, and they need to smash the center position. Like it's one of those slates where the more I run the Sims, the more it's just like I've been waiting for something to show up, and now without Kristaps Porzingis and Jrue Holiday on the floor, I mean, Tatum and Brown are definitely going to be that path. I mean, those are the two guys that I'm definitely going to get the most of at 7,900 and above.
All right. Some other questions that have come in. We've got some super chats here. Boy, people are just leaving us nice super chats, not even attaching questions to it. Willie Jenkins says, y'all are the best. Let's make some money tonight. Willie Jenkins, thank you. Appreciate it. Chris Williams, just atoning. I suggest others do the same. Hit the like, bring yourself some good karma. And then Chris also gifted out 10 YouTube memberships. So Chris, we appreciate you. A couple questions from the Discord channel. One here is from Active Guru. And I like this question. He wants to know, who is our favorite high-owned and low-owned player at each position on DraftKings? So I've got some updated lineups here. So I think this is a reasonable way that we could go position by position. Just here's our favorite let's see, a high-owned, low-owned player. Some of these positions for the high-owned player, there's only going to be like one high-owned player to choose from. But I do think there's a good amount of contrarian guys we could talk about. But starting at point guard, Eric, who's your favorite chalk option at point guard on DraftKings?
Shake Milton.
I like both Milton and Schroeder as chalk options. Just because you said Milton, I'll go Schroeder. I'm going to use the other one at shooting guard as well. I mean, you just look at the situation with the Golden State Warriors. No Steph Curry, no Draymond Green. This sets up for Dennis Schroeder to play a pretty similar role to what he played in Brooklyn now with all of these guys out. And Dennis Schroeder, I don't think he's a great fit with the current Golden State Warriors team when everybody's healthy. But he's a pretty good fit for them when everybody's out. And they need a guy who's going to be a primary facilitator and ball handler. Dennis Schroeder, that's going to be one for me. Favorite contrarian option at point guard?
Chris Dunn.
I'll say Derek White.
Okay.
Shooting guard, favorite chalk option at shooting guard, Kyrie Irving.
Kyrie Irving for sure.
Favorite contrarian shooting guard, Eric?
I would go the Derek White route, but to give something different than I'm looking at my lineups here. Oh yeah, this is the dusty. This is the good stuff. Do I want to give it up? Do I want to give it up as Nuke of the night? Whatever. Yeah, whatever. Benedict Mathurin.
All right. Keon Johnson for me. There's a lot of opportunity in Brooklyn. I think it's interesting to take some shots on the guys who are sub 10% on. Like, why are we looking at the Brooklyn Nets and saying, like, oh my God, Noah Clowney has to be the guy? Not to say he's a poor option, but I don't think it makes sense that there are some Nets guys who are just pulling tons of ownership. And there's other guys like, I mean, we've seen Keon Johnson popular other times that Nets have been shorthanded. So anyway, Keon Johnson for me at shooting guard is a contrarian option. Mm-hmm. Small forward, favorite chalk option. There's kind of only one. So Jason Tatum.
Yeah. Tatum Brown, small forward. Yeah. Contrarian one. I'm going to go Norman Powell.
I will go Tristan da Silva for a contrarian option for me at $4,500. Power forward, favorite chalk option at the position. That's still Tatum for me.
Yeah, Tatum by a pretty noticeable margin over Jonathan Kuminga. But Kuminga's great too, to a certain extent. I'm just right around the field on Kuminga. I'm just jamming Tatum here at the moment. Favorite power forward is Jarris Walker for contrarian.
Yeah, we got Jarris Walker, $3,200, so he's a punt play. He's only projected for 10% ownership. I'm going to go with Andrew Wiggins at $5,600. I think Wiggins is a great leverage play off of Jonathan Kuminga.
Love.
Wiggins is $100 more expensive, and he's got about a third of the ownership. I think that's, if you guys are looking to save some ownership in a lineup, I think that's a pivot you could certainly make.
He's also the guy pulling ownership that, like, I don't think anybody assumes Podziemski is going to be starting, but he's 4K, so like he fits. I think there's a very real chance, like the most real chance that we have is Jonathan Kuminga doesn't start out of any of the like main guys starting. Like, I guess Trace Jackson Davis is close, but like Jonathan Kuminga not starting wouldn't surprise me whatsoever.
I don't think he will start.
Yeah, I don't think he will either. He's a little bit overowned, I think, maybe, but I'm just around the field on him, so I'm not going to like bitch too much.
All right, at center now, there's a contrarian option I really, really like at center. I'm curious if you're going to like the same guy.
Yeah,
chalk center. I'll go Nick Claxton.
Yeah, so I have two different ones other than Claxton. Yeah, Claxton's the guy that you should be playing the most of, but I like two real big punts. Daniel Gafford being one and Day'Ron Sharpe being the other.
Okay. Do you want to do because we just kind of gave out some of our favorite contrarian options. Do you want to do Nuke of the Night now? Because the guy I want to say right now is going to be my Nuke of the Night.
Cool. Let's do it.
All right, there we go. Always very exciting when we do the shows in StreamYard, and we could actually hear all the noises that come with the different animations we have here. So Eric, I'll lead it off here because this is my answer for a contrarian center, and we're getting to a lot of players. I think you're going to figure out pretty quickly which way I'm going to go with this. We're getting to a lot of players from the Brooklyn Nets, not really getting to a lot of guys from the San Antonio Spurs. We've also got a lot of value that opened up. Wemby is sub 10% owned against a hobbled Brooklyn Nets team with infinite ceiling to Wemby. His ceiling now, short of Nikola Jokic, is the highest of anybody in DFS now. And for FanDuel, where you're getting the extra points for the blocks and steals, his upside is comparable to Nikola Jokic's. I thought after the game that Wemby had on Christmas, especially being a national TV sort of game, I thought he was going to end up being popular today. Especially because if you think, if we're going to play lineups that have, 1, 2, 3, I'm sure some people in the field are going to be playing a lot of lineups with 4 Nets players and just nobody on the other side from the San Antonio Spurs. So I am way overweight to the field on Wemby. I've got him in more than 30% of lineups right now, Eric. I do think it's reasonable to think that maybe his ownership does end up being a little bit higher than what it's projected to be. But I don't think he's going to be chalk or anything like that. And with the sub 10% ownership projection we have on him, I get way overweight to the field on Victor Wembanyama. That, to me, is my favorite way to still play the top value options on the slate, but still being different in a way as well.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, Wemby, again, I don't love spending up for Jokic here today at the moment because it's just kind of hard to do. Some of this, I mean, we're taking shots on some dusty value, if we're being honest right now. And then we don't know what to make of Golden State. Like, this could be really, really good. It could be really, really bad. Like, if Lindy Waters, Kyle Anderson gets the start, it's going to look very, very different than, a Pajemski getting a start out of the middle of nowhere where it'd feel pretty good because you're already getting to him. So I'm with you where Wemby, I'll give him a little bit of a boost, make sure that I get to a little bit more. But I was going to give this guy up at the shooting guard spot, but I look at this lineup right now for Brooklyn: Milton, Keon Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Noah Clowney, Claxton. If we get Dorian Finney-Smith out, there's going to be something that gets inserted. But the one thing I'm pretty positive about is that Keon Johnson is under-owned right now at sub 5K, 4,700. He's sub 10% right now. This is the guy that I'm the most confident because he's been in this rotation no matter what. Anything else we're adding into it, whether that's Jalen Wilson, like he can play 30, 32 minutes, and I think the usage goes up for him. But 4,900, not the most advantageous tag. If it ends up being Tyrese Martin, yeah, I'll probably get to a little bit there. But I'm pretty confident Keon Johnson ends up in this starting lineup. He played 30 minutes yesterday, had 15 shot attempts, 2 for 9 from 3, didn't exactly set the world on fire. But I just think that this is a guy that I kind of like getting to a little bit more than the field does. Cause like, I think he's projected in to start as is. And Dorian Finney-Smith being out just kind of opens up more stuff for Clowney, but he's 4,700. And I just kind of look at the positionality for him here too. Shake Milton going to be a part of my lineups no matter what, but Keon Johnson, if he's going to be sub 10% on this slate, I think he's really, really interesting.
I could dig it. So both of us, sub 10% owned guys, although with that said, I know projected for sub 10% ownership, but
God,
I will be honest. What happened?
Anthony Black is starting.
Yeah, he's been in and out of the starting lineup.
Yeah, but he's back in the starting lineup. Is
Black, Suggs, KCP, Tristan Da Silva, Goga Bitadze. So the traveling queen back to the bench goes traveling queen for tonight. But yeah, so there's a change that right away going to have to just finished running an update of the Sims so we could answer some of these questions. Now going to have to rerun everything again for Anthony Black starting. But what do you make of Black moving back into the starting lineup where, like you said, he had been out of the starting lineup. Queen was starting. Now we've got Anthony Black back in the starting lineup. Last couple of, actually, he's only made, it was the one start a couple games ago. He only played 18 and a half minutes in that start.
It sucks. I mean, it's just an interesting, it's hard. Gary Harris is in too. So, I mean, it's like with Gary Harrison, there's just so many ways that it breaks down. I think what happens is like, you get a guy in Trevelyan Queen who played 37 minutes yesterday. They probably want to manage his minutes a little bit more. I can't play Cole Anthony. Like there's just no way that he's going to be somebody. They're just healthy enough here at the guard spot where, it just kind of plays more into what I was looking at where it's like nothing looks all that good. But if you saw 30 minutes for Anthony Black, it wouldn't surprise me. But I think on this specific slate, I would much rather play Keon Johnson. It probably just reiterates that I don't want to play anything from Orlando.
We do have a super chat here from Zevin711. Jacob says he thinks they might have missed this super chat. Zevin asked, who do we prefer between Dinwiddie and McConnell? Dinwiddie and McConnell. I think there's a little bit more, but they're really similar sort of plays. I'll lean towards McConnell, but neither one are guys that I'm trying to get into my lineups.
Yeah, the Conley one's weird. Like Nickeil Alexander-Walker being questionable just doesn't even matter on this slate. It's so weird. Like, I just don't know what I would mine out of it. Like, they can just give a couple of minutes here and there to whomever they want. Like, DiVincenzo can walk into a couple more. He's 4K. I think he's probably the most appealing to take shots on. He hasn't made shots, period, this season, so that's been a problem. But I think Mike Conley 4,500 is at least like in play, and it looks better
McConnell.
with Nickeil Alexander-Walker. What?
I was trying TJ McConnell.
Oh,
I was trying to notify you, but you were
you could have
dead set on talking about Mike Conley. It's all right.
It's all right. Nickeil Alexander-Walker available to play. It's hilarious how that stuff happens, like on cue every single time.
The world has a sense of humor. The world. What are the odds? The odds of that happening, I don't know if people really truly realize how ridiculous it is. But I asked Eric who he preferred between Dinwiddie and McConnell. He mishears me. He talks about Mike Conley with Nickeil Alexander-Walker being questionable, and try to let him know. Not Conley, McConnell. And you're like, okay, and just kept talking about Mike Conley. And then as soon as you finish talking, we find out that it doesn't matter anyway because Nickeil Alexander-Walker is in. So there we have it.
I mean, I talked about it at the three guys I was basically trying to think of for Nuke of the night. We're all like shooting guard pivots or stuff off of some of like the I would call it a little dicey. Like if Buddy Hield doesn't start, that probably sucks for Golden State. If it doesn't end up being anything other than Dennis Schroeder is going to start, but like maybe it ends up being Podziemski, which would be okay by me because I'm going to get to him no matter what. But I think what's interesting about this slate is like trying to find one or two pieces in the early games that you can really kind of like react to how well or poorly they play and then pivot on Golden State accordingly. And something I do a lot in NFL where it's like, yeah, I'm trying to find these early pieces in like the 1 p.m. Eastern time wave. And then when 4:25 comes around, like I'm going to play chalkier options if my lineups are doing really well. And I like the chalk because, you know, the chalk's going to look better. Something like that where like, yeah, chalky Schroeder, chalky Wiggins, chalky Hield, like all of those would be good things. I guess Wiggins not even chalky here at the moment, but just saying like Kuminga starting would obviously be something you'd want to get to if he is starting no matter what, because he'd just look even better than he does already. I like in this early window taking those shots, and Benedict Matherin's that guy on the Indy side for me.
Jeremy Savage in the chat saying the Jovic nose break was crazy as hell. Were you watching playback for that night? Do you know what he's referencing?
No.
So there was a playback show Josh and I were doing. There was a Heat game on. It was the only game on at the time. And they kept going to close-ups of Nikola Jovic, who's got the world's biggest nose. And I was commenting on those, like how many times, something along the lines of how many times you have to break your nose before it looks like that? And then also, how does he not break his nose all the time? 10 seconds later, elbows in the face, breaks his nose.
Oh, you're a sorcerer. You're a wizard, Harry. It's nice.
That one was, I feel like I summoned that nose break in the same way that you just summoned Nickeil Alexander-Walker being in.
Unbelievable.
Malukar left us a 2v2 here. This is for a FanDuel single entry. He is asking us Bitadze and Royce O'Neal or PJ Washington and Christian Brown. Let's see.
Man, is that a combo of guys I wasn't thinking about? I'd definitely go Washington Brown, if only for late swappability. Like I would not play Bitadze in the early window.
Yeah, I don't love either of those combinations either. So I'll align myself with your logic and go the PJ Washington and the Christian Brown combination. Also, I'm looking right now at Anthony Black's minutes the last time he started because, yeah, like I said, he only played 18 and a half minutes, so I thought that was pretty bizarre. He played almost the entire first half, did get into some foul trouble. And then what ends up happening is he starts the second half, he plays a minute, and then doesn't return to the game.
Did he get hurt?
No, he was in foul trouble and then just wasn't playing all that well. So he gets in foul trouble in the second half, and they're just like, yeah, we just won't bring him back.
The traveling queen took his shot. He figured out. He's like, I'm gonna get myself in this rotation, and he did.
That's how Eric got his shot on the shows.
Yep. Shouldn't have been sick that day, Josh. Shouldn't have been sick.
So with that in mind, Anthony Black, who is $4,700 on DraftKings, he is $5,100 on FanDuel. That's a tough price tag to get to, $5,100 on FanDuel. Anthony Black, somebody you think you might have some interest in, or is that a no?
I'm probably going to have like a little bit. Again, I really don't want to play anything from the early window. We could get some really weird stuff coming up later in the night that I just want to be versatile. I really, really, really don't want to be attaching my sales to anything from Orlando or New York here in the early window. And I've traditionally been of the mind where I think the Knicks are always interesting for tournaments. Like I always like the idea of getting to a Hart or a Bridges. When you get 40 minutes of these dudes and they're never going to be priced above 7K, the chances of them just finding a way onto an upside is just higher than it's going to be for a lot of people. Like OG Anunoby 5,900 is the one piece that like in a main lineup, I kind of like, thought I'll play it in a bunch of single entry stuff and then just kind of react to that. But San Antonio, Brooklyn is just cheaper. And I think the minutes upside is like comparable. So it's almost like an unnecessary risk going up against Orlando, where we know they aren't going to push the pace. We know that without Banchero and Wagner, the chances of that game shooting out just go way, way down. And, just the books are kind of emphasizing that here with this total. So like kind of an unnecessary risk to take, I think.
Anthony Black, we have projections updated. He does not look good in our data. He's also not a great points from a fantasy producer. So we've got 24 and a half minutes for Anthony Black. That has him right around 20 fantasy points. That makes him pretty unplayable on both.
Yeah. So I mean, the minutes are so volatile. I have to say that it's a back-to-back for Orlando. So like if somebody projected him for 28 minutes, I wouldn't say that that's a problem. Oh, Dorian Finney-Smith in. Well, that's
all
fun.
Right. So that is one more. But by the way, the more guys in Nets rotation, the more annoying it ends up being today, because there is possibility for the Nets to just run out like an 11-man rotation and nobody plays more than 30 minutes.
I'm so surprised he's in.
Same.
That's really weird. I was pretty confident that he was going to sit. I mean, Cameron Johnson's sitting, but we're going to roll out DFS today. All right, cool. Fun times, guys. I guess, I mean, he didn't play the front end of it, so I guess shouldn't be terribly, but that's just annoying because like those minutes, it's almost impossible to know what we're going to get from a minutes upside for DFS. Like how many minutes do we have him in for right now?
Let's see. We have him for Dorian Finney-Smith 30.
Yeah.
He doesn't even project well in 30 minutes, by the way.
I know. Well, it's not that he projects well. It's that those minutes take away from what would be an interesting Tyrese Martin, what would be, the Keon Johnson play that I was kind of emphasizing. I'm not saying it was completely reliant upon Dorian Finney-Smith, because I think he's under-owned even in that scenario, but my interest level comes down quite a bit. I just kind of assumed DFS was going to be out.
Yep, he is in. So were you projecting him to be out?
No, I had DFS in for 22 minutes just to like really lowball it. And then it made Keon Johnson look way better. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put Dorian Finney-Smith in for like a full go. But that's something that I've realized. I really like dunks and threes. You've kind of turned me on to dunks and threes from a couple of years ago. They do player-by-player simulations, and that's something that they tend to do a lot. And I think it's really great in terms of projecting game flow. And I found totals to be very, very profitable, just kind of like taking minutes assumptions and kind of doing something similar to what they're doing. I do it a tiny bit differently, but like they just basically give like 2/3 of the minutes or like just a little bit over half of the minutes to a specific guy who's got a Q tag for it. And you kind of do the pace metrics with that. And then you can kind of like move pieces around. I really, really enjoy that. And I've started to intertwine it a little bit into my DFS game, not as necessary, but it's just like a fun exercise because I'm going to use it for betting all the time anyway. I might as well try to find some extra utility to it. And I've enjoyed it, but like, God, Shake Milton, he's going to be probably the only like guy that I really am saying you got to play. Like Nick Claxton's going to be a little bit overowned relative to all the other center plays. He's still a really good play. Don't get me wrong, but like, yeah, the Keon Johnson thing's about to come ripping down.
Anybody from, just because you mentioned not really liking the first game on the slate, but are there any in particular players you do want to be getting yourself exposure to in the first game, just because it locks in 16 minutes and we only have the Knicks Magic game locking at 7 p.m. Eastern time, all the other games starting after that? Anything at all that you do like from that game? Or if somebody's just hand building a couple of lineups, are they good to avoid it entirely?
Yeah, if you're hand building a couple, I think avoid it entirely. I have a couple shares of Josh Hart, a couple shares of Mikal Bridges, a couple shares of OG Anunoby, a couple shares of Karl Anthony Towns. I should probably get to some 8,100 Brunson, just because it's $8,100 Brunson. He's still shooting the ball pretty decently, 42% from three on the season, 48% from the field. Like, obviously playing alongside of Karl Anthony Towns is going to hurt your fantasy profile. Taking on Orlando is going to make it look even worse. But some of these tags have kind of come down to account for the matchup. And I think, again, the Knicks are just one of those teams you can always take shots on. But like, there's no way that I would even play double digits of any single player in this game, knowing that we have so much news coming up later. So it's just a smattering of them. I'm playing 150. I'm playing like 25 lineups in that main $8 and just kind of moving along with my day. So I'm sure I'll get to like one or two pieces from that game in it. But I mean, it's just weird to look at the ownership too. Tristan Da Silva pulling the most on the Orlando side. Jalen Brunson, number 2 there at 5%. Like, the field's kind of intertwined with me there. Precious Achiuwa is just a price play, 3,500. Maybe you can, Karl Anthony Towns getting to foul trouble. It happened a lot more in Minnesota than what it seems it's happened so far in his Knicks tenure. It's popped up from time to time. And like, I think Precious Achiuwa would definitely be a beneficiary there. But yeah, if you just completely faded this, hand building out 5 lineups, wouldn't blame you at all.
Do me a favor, Jacob. I want to look at the updated ownership for both DraftKings as well as FanDuel. So let's look at DraftKings here, then we'll look at FanDuel right after. And if you guys haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the channel. So here's where we have the chalk right now. We've got Nick Claxton over 40% as well as Jason Tatum. Those are your only 2 massive pieces of chalk on DraftKings. Shake Milton, 33% owned. Then everybody else, sub 30% owned. Kuminga just under 30%. Schroeder just under 30%. Jaylen Brown just under 30%. You look at this ownership, Eric, it's pretty flat relative to what we expect to come from slates. Part of that's because we got the 10 p.m. game included on the DraftKings slate as well. So we got extra options to choose from. But is there anything in particular that stands out to you about the most popular players on the slate, whether it's a number you think is too high or a player that isn't there that you think maybe should be?
Yeah, I think Claxton's too high purely because of how many center plays look similar to him. Like, I think there's a lot of center plays that you can make a case for. You brought up Wemby up top. Obviously, Nikola Jokic on any slate ending on a day and why. You've got so many different mid-range guys. Zach Edey has been much different, and obviously blowouts help. Trace Jackson Davis, if he gets the start, he's somebody you definitely want to have in some lineups. Daniel Gafford is probably the guy that I'm going to make the biggest case for just getting to more of him and less of Claxton. But like, a lot of the news that's coming up that I think is the most interesting, Derek Lively questionable tag, who starts for Golden State between Looney and Trace Jackson Davis, Jared Allen at a 6K tag where you want him out there as many minutes as humanly possible against Jokic. Like, going small, not really an option with Nikola Jokic out there on the floor for Cleveland. They're not probably going to play Mobley at the 5, or maybe Tristan Thompson plays some minutes there. But Jared Allen, barring foul trouble, should be out there an absolute metric ton. I think there's just so many of those really nice center plays, Zach Edey and Misi in the same game, they come up later that I think Claxton, probably the one guy that I'm looking at where it's like, yeah, I'll probably end up capping him around 25-30% and just spreading that 15-20% elsewhere.
Yeah, I am looking at, I was overweight to the field on Tristan Da Silva as a contrarian option, but I'm moving some stuff around to give myself a little bit more flexibility. I don't actually want now, as I'm finalize my laps, I want to make sure I don't have more than 10% of any player in the first game on the slate. If I've got, a couple lineups with Cat or Da Silva or whatever, it's not an issue for me or anything. I just don't want to have 15 or 20% of any of these guys, which I did have before.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, I've got that.
Wild
weeded out now. Getting back to some of the questions from Discord, we've got a couple of them here. One is from Einsteinium. Wants to know any interest in Pascal Siakam. We'll answer these questions and we'll look at the FanDuel ownership and do the same thing we just did with the DraftKings ownership. Any interest in Pascal Siakam for you, Eric? For me, it is no.
Yeah, not a ton. I'm going to take shots on a Benedict Mathurin because if that game stays close, there's just nobody who goes out on the floor, can play, some kind of defense there. They don't have Nembhard. They don't have Nesmith. They don't have Toppin. And I think Mathurin probably is the main beneficiary of that. I'd be very surprised if they played any James Johnson. So it's basically going to be Jarris Walker. I talked about him at 3,200 as being one of my favorite contrarian options there. We obviously have more Celtics interest than we did before. Like, we're playing a lot of Brown. We're playing a lot of Tatum. I think we got to take some shots on Derek White at this current ownership. If you're going to take those pieces along for the ride, I think Mathurin, a much better option just because of where that salary is and the positionality is. Ben Shepherd, a terrible fantasy producer. I would much rather take shots on a TJ McConnell if you're going to go there. But Pascal Siakam just kind of sitting in salary no man's land. 7,500. He's been okay, but like, this team's been terrible, and he's got to be better than what he's been for them to be successful against Boston. It's weird to say 7,500 Pascal Siakam. I don't really have interest.
There's just a lot of other options. It's been a super weird season as well for the Indiana Pacers. Like Halliburton is just kind of a guy for them. It's so bizarre. There's no weirder trade to relitigate than that Domantas Sabonis Tyrese Halliburton trade, because it seemed like the most important trade ever at one point that really significantly altered the direction of both franchises. And now both teams have just been so underwhelming, whereas Sabonis has had fit issues with De'Aaron Fox. Halliburton's really regressed. So just weird situations overall. But anyway, all that aside, Pascal Siakam, not somebody I'm getting into lineups. M. Grizzly wants to know, what are our thoughts on Noah Clowney? Sims are making him his highest owned player. Yeah, I think Clowney's a really good option.
Yeah, Clowney just fits in the lineups easily. 4,700. You don't have Ben Simmons. Again, I'm not just running to the window to play 50% of him like I'm currently getting, but I'm going to be overweight to him when it's all said and done.
How are you doing on your lineups updating, by the way?
I'm doing okay. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm kind of doing the same thing as you, where I'm organizing that first game of the night and making sure that I don't have anything crazy where I don't want to get to like I have 4% Precious Achua. He's my highest owned in that game right now, out of 175 lineups. So it's just making sure that ends up coming to fruition.
Yeah, I'm doing one final run. I thought I wasn't going to do any more, but I've got time. Figure, why not? Why not do one more right before lock here? Shouldn't change anything too significantly, but, maybe there's a late ownership change that ended up happening or something, which I don't think that was the case, but whatever. I might as well do one more. Jacob, if you wouldn't mind, can you pull up the FanDuel ownership projections? I want to look at those and just see if there's anything in there that is standing out to myself and Eric, where a little bit heavier chalk on FanDuel, Shake Milton over 50% owned. That's a lot of ownership going to Jonathan Kuminga. I think is very iffy to start. If he starts, clearly a really good option, but I don't know I want to preload 50% of Kuminga and risk him not starting. So once again, same deal, FanDuel, DraftKings. I really do like Andrew Wiggins as a leverage option off of Jonathan Kuminga. Then you got Tatum 35% owned, Clowney 35% owned, Claxton 33% owned, Jaylen Brown 31% owned. Anybody whose ownership, it's mostly the same players and around the same-ish ownership, but any players you look at here, Eric, and say, that guy looks a little bit high to me, or somebody who isn't pulling ownership you think should be more popular?
I mean, not to some crazy extent. Trying to find something that I have like a major issue with. Not really. I guess Bradley Beal's a little bit weird in a quarter of the field's lineups, but he's 6,900, no Booker. I get it. Yeah, I can't look at anything on the page right now. Like, Trace Jackson Davis has power forward eligibility over there. That is very, very useful. I totally get why the field's getting to 19, 20% of him there. I would say I would make an argument that what's his price tag? Daniel Gafford's price tag on FanDuel.
Daniel Gafford is 4,900.
Yeah, I would want to make some room for Daniel Gafford in my life and just hope that news broke my way. And then there's got to be something you can swap into later if Derek Lively's in.
Yeah, Trace Jackson Davis.
Yeah, that's super easy. Get to more Daniel Gafford. I know that seems like a weird one, but that's probably the guy I'd get to more of on FanDuel. Like, you need your center play to smash. Daniel Gafford would go from like 18 to 28 minutes for me. It's a different basketball player. On DK, I'd want to get to as much as I humanly possibly could if you get Derek Lively out. So, like, That's like the main piece at the center position that I think I'm much more comfortable eating that chalk than like waiting around for Trace Jackson Davis and so on and so forth. And if Lively's in, it's just so easy because I just get off of all of it.
We've got a super chat here. This one is from actually a couple of super chats came in. One here from CG just said, no question. Just want to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, fellas. Let's keep crushing them in 2025. Yeah. Shout out to CG, one of the good guys who we see pretty frequently in the YouTube chat and playback, also over on Tails. So if you guys want to check out the content that CG DFS puts out, follow him on Twitter, and then also check out his Tails package. Malcolm Revamp, top spend up options on DK and FanDuel. So for me, top spend up option on both sites, it is Jason Tatum. Relative to ownership, it is Wemby, though.
Yeah, relative to ownership, Wemby looks. I mean, I'm a little surprised. I bet we get to the flip and Wemby's a little bit more popular. I have 29% of him now. I did not anticipate getting to 29% Wemby at any point, but here we are.
Yeah, I like Wemby as well. He's my nuke of the night. Now we've got a super chat from Sunflower, wants to know Schroeder and Sokan or Derek White and Noah Clowney for a DK GPP. That's White and Clowney for me.
Yeah, it's going to probably be White and Clowney. Like, again, the Derek White thing is so weird to me. I just ran the Sims again, 5%. I'm going to ROI boost him after the fact. I'm going to let this get to lock. Again, I have like nothing from this first game of any noticeable importance, like 4% Brunson now in this last run. I'm going to upload this. I'm going to be done with it. I did the same thing as you. I'm going to just cap Tristan da Silva. I think he's fine now. He could look much, much worse based on what we get later in the night. So I'm just not going to commit to anything in double digits in this first game.
All right. And we are all caught up on super chats. Let me make sure there was no other questions that came into Discord, which there are not. So Eric, I'm also making the final alterations to my lineups here, but anything in your final lineup set that is either unexpected to you or surprising in any kind of way?
Not surprising. I mean, I'm playing 60% Jason Tatum right now, which is probably more than I want when it's all said and done. But as I said before, we have one game locking now. I'm not too concerned with what I'm going to do yet. I'm just getting these uploaded now. I'll take a quick scan, maybe like hand build out something like an OG lineup or something there. Because again, sub 6K for OG, you can always just walk into the stocks and threes thing. So nothing that I'm really going to be changing, nothing that's really changing or showing up in a pronounced effect. I will say using the Sims tool, what's beautiful is if you recognize that there's value that could come up later. Hi, Nick Claxton. How are you? Mm-hmm. Going down on him, going up on Daniel Gafford, hoping that news breaks my way.
All right, Jacob, I'm going to need you to isolate that clip. You know what I'm talking about. So for me, final version of my lineups that I am liking, I split ownership between Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga, where I'm just a little bit underweight to the field on Kuminga and then about double the field on Andrew Wiggins. I really am starting to like that.
What did I do? Because I just
you said you were going.
Josh is just laughing.
You said when you were talking about your updates to your lineups, you said that you were going down on Nick Claxton.
I mean, he's probably well endowed.
I would think so.
It would be an honor.
Playing in the National Basketball Association.
There's a Josh Hammer joke there somewhere. I'm just gonna move on and take the L. It's okay.
Let's see. Any final updates that I want to make to my lineups here? Yeah. Not really. I'm going to be doing the same thing as you, though, where I'm good with this initial set of lineups I have, Eric. And then once we get the live ownership that's going to be coming in 5-6 minutes here, then I'll do another run of the late swap with some updated ownership information.
Sounds good.
All right. Let's upload these lineups. Yeah. 10 seconds to spare. All good. Guys, thank you very much for watching. If you've not done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't go anywhere. Hang out over on Playback. Josh and myself, we're going to be reacting to any kind of late breaking news. Starting lineups are yet to come out. Those could be weird. They typically end up being, especially when you get value on teams like the Warriors and the Nets. So come join Josh and I over in Playback. Derek Lively's questionable. That's something that could break as well. See you guys over in Playback. And have a good weekend. There we go. Nick Claxton, Eric's significant other on screen right there. Have a good weekend.
God damn it.